I really have to be open to experimenting and taking some risks with things. I mean, even like the painting behind me right here, that's a bit more abstract than some of my paintings. And I really tried to stay playful and, I try not to take things too seriously.
Hi, welcome to Chatham Coffee Tour. Today I have my guest and friend, artist Whitney Heavey here. Welcome, Whitney.
Hi, Barb. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. It's really exciting. As you can see, Whitney's an artist because I wish I had such a nice display behind me as she does behind her. Whitney's been painting for how many years, Whitney?
Well, really my whole life, but more professionally for, I think it's been about 21 years.
It's beautiful. And her artwork, well, one thing I love about her artwork is the colors. She just has such vibrant, beautiful blues and colors of the ocean, a little bit of pink I've seen sparkled in there here and there. And how do you get your inspiration? I mean, Chatham's obviously a lot of help, but
Most often it's outdoors. I grew up in New England and really called Cape Cod my home. Chatham specifically, my whole life. That's been the constant. We came down here in summers, and I've always been driven artistically by the landscape. And really, there's no better artist than Mother Nature. So I'm just constantly inspired, and Chatham in particular, just as there's so much inspiration. And my biggest muse is the ocean, but honestly, coastline, ocean, and occasionally some colorful flowers in the winter when we're all a little color starved.
yes, that's probably true. And do you paint better in the winter or the summer, or does it not really matter? It just whatever.
I paint all year round. And years ago, when my kids were little, and I was out of my studio in the summer, because I didn't have a studio on Cape Cod at that time, I started a summer sketchbook practice that just allowed me to be more on the go and still keeping my hand in art. And those sketchbooks have really turned out to be such a valuable tool for me when I'm in my studio in the winter. So I'd say I get inspiration all year long. I go outside all year long. I definitely use my summer sketchbooks a lot in the winter to paint. Sometimes the winter is more productive for me because I can be in the studio more. So really, every time of year, it all depends.
I've seen your sketchbooks on your Instagram. They're pretty neat to see, just little vignettes of different scenes. And then you can take those and pieces of them and put them into a piece.
They're great. And I love, I work a lot of times, I work from photos, videos. I like videos because it can take me back to the scene a bit more emotionally. You hear the wind, the birds, you get more of a sense of what the day was like. You lose so much in a lot of photos, but I also love sometimes painting from a sketch where I don't have as much information. I have the information I need, and then I can be a little less literal and a bit more expressive. And the sketchbook is just a taking off point for me.
So you can be creative more,
Exactly.
a little bit more sometimes without, yeah, being as literal as in the video. Well, I find that in the winter when I'm doing my Instagram, I often want to have a summer scene pop up because it gets a little bit gray at Chatham. And I look at them and I just go, oh, the colors are so vibrant. Like I miss that summer pop. And I'm sure you do too. And to try to put yourself back in it to recreate it must be sort of a feat.
It's true. I feel the same way. Although I do have to, living on the coast in the winter, it's definitely more gray. But what I've learned through these, especially since living here year round, is even on a gray day, a lot of times if you get yourself out there down to the water, there'll be some little break in the clouds and some incredibly magic light that shows up just at the right moment. And you have to look harder for the color, but it is here in the winter. And like in December, especially this year, there were so many incredible sunsets, and they fueled my need for color. Actually, all through winter, there were a lot of great sunsets, and so it's not as much in your face, the color in the winter, but it's here. You just, I feel like even in the fall, off Cape, where you get more in New England, anyways, where you get that incredible, vibrant foliage. We don't get as much of that because of all our pines, but if you go down to the marsh, you'll find this incredible color, but you have to look a little more closely, if that makes sense.
And it may be more like a cranberry than a bright, pink of a rose. I also find in the winter walking around, I see a lot of animals, and I've saw deer a couple times on walks this winter, and just birds that are winter birds that are popping out. And do you paint at all animals? I don't remember seeing a lot of.
I've become a I don't want to. Well, I am a birder, but I don't want to be held to. I actually can identify a lot of birds by sound, which is pretty exciting to me.
You have that app?
I do, Merlin, and I love it. I love it. I haven't painted many animals. I've painted my dog a few times. I've put a suggestion of birds in my paintings. I would love to paint more birds in the future. I see a lot of deer, actually, a lot of deer, a lot of turkeys. I actually got chased by a turkey last week while I was running, chased me around a car. And I've seen the same turkey like stopping traffic. And
was it a tom? Did he put his big?
It was.
Wow.
And then one day I was driving the same spot, and he was attacking my car, pecking at the tire.
You're kidding. I haven't really heard that. I know obviously when out running, if you go for a run or a walk, I do kind of beware at dusk for coyotes for sure, but I've never thought to worry about the turkeys. That's funny.
No, and I've seen coyotes, but they never seem to want anything to do with me.
Oh, that's so funny.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I know you're the most beautiful pictures that I've seen of yours have waves and ocean, and that just seems to be your strength, and just the way you can do the sun sort of bouncing off of the waves. I think it's gorgeous.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
And you display in Chatham, and then you do Portland, right?
Yes. My first gallery representation was with Munson Gallery here in Chatham. That used to be a brick and mortar gallery, and now it's a little bit more online and not as big. And they display my work at Pisces Restaurant in South Chatham, one of my favorites. And then I have a couple pieces at Chatham Works, which is a local gym. And then I show up at the Portland Art Gallery in Portland, Maine.
Oh, that's neat. That's a little bit of a drive to bring your canvases up there.
It is, but it's beautiful up there too. It's a great gallery. I love being with them.
And how do the landscapes compare? Because ocean to ocean, obviously the Maine coastline's slightly different than the Cape Cod coastline.
Especially around Chatham, I'm not as familiar with as many other parts of the Cape, but with Chatham, with our tidal flats, and we just get so many incredibly vibrant colors and greens and translucent colors that I think sometimes almost seem unbelievable. But when you're here and it's low tide and you see them, it's stunning, the colors you get and the variety of greens and blues. And I would say in Maine, well, definitely they have different, I don't know if they're different pine trees, but they look very different. They're not the scrub pines. And then their water just seems like much deeper blues. I mean, we get the deep blues here too, but it's this, it just has a much sort of deeper blue and more rocks.
And
more
rocky coasts.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But also beautiful up there too.
I agree.
In a different way.
I agree. Yeah, I'm a little partial to our sandy shores here,
We
but
have a
that's
lot of sand,
yeah,
for good and bad.
that's
It's
right.
good.
Good
It's
for
good. Yeah, they have a lot more coves and things like that, so
yeah, a little bit different scenery. Well, I was reading a little bit about your background. So you were a teacher for a little while, and what I thought was interesting is you were a buyer for children's pieces. What did that mean? What does that do?
I was a teacher at a boarding school. It's where I met my husband. Then we moved back to the Boston area for so he could go to graduate school. And I ended up taking a job with a publisher, and that worked on children's literature series. And so I worked with the editors, the design team, and the illustrators. So my job was to go and find illustrators, present them to the team, and then I worked with the illustrators, sending them specs and edits, and from the conceptual to the finished phase, sketches, all that. It was great. I loved it.
That is such an interesting job. So if somebody writes a children's book, but they don't draw or they're not an illustrator, so they would go to their publisher and you'd be the middleman sort of for the publisher.
Well, these were reading series for schools, for school programs. And so they would be anthologies with collections of stories, poems. So, we would have the written text, and then I would find the illustrators, and we would design what we wanted for illustrations. So a little different than the storybooks that you read to your kids. Those are actually called trade.
Oh, okay. So these are a little bit more for the industry, for the school.
Right, right, exactly. It was great. I got to look at art all day long and work with illustrators, and it was fun.
And pick which ones you liked too. And
Definitely, definitely. I mean, it was up to the editorial team to pick which ones, but I had to make sure they're available, but I got to sort of present three that I liked and thought would work well with the text.
that must have helped you kind of develop your eye. And when you see somebody else's pieces and what you're looking for, and you knew exactly what direction you wanted to go and how it would fit.
Absolutely. I think one of the challenges that I face, and I think a lot of artists face, is that, especially in school, we're taught to critique our work. In fact, I host a little critique group with some other artists in my studio, and you're always looking at your work and critiquing it and going, is it done? Is it working? What does it need? And so sometimes that you can critique a painting forever. And sometimes you can over critique it to the point where you can edit out the little imperfections that, in my opinion, make it more interesting. Not imperfections, but the things that are more unique and less, you can over edit it. So
does it take some time before you look back at it and say, I mean, I know with some of the print publications or stuff I do for Instagram, I go through that same sort of, so I like it this way. I know how I want it to look. And because I can't draw really at all, but I can manipulate other objects and subjects, and I can figure out how to do it creatively the way I want. But do you like it better when you go back and look a few months later, or how do you feel about it? How does that time help or hurt?
sometimes I'll do a painting, and years later I'll look at it and I'll still be happy with it. And that's a really good feeling. And then other times, you'll be like, I gotta change that. Or that is what was I thinking? But I also sometimes in my process, I work on a lot of paintings at once, and sometimes I'll get sort of stuck in a painting, or I'll reach a point where I like it, but I don't feel like it's done. So I'll set it to the side. And honestly, sometimes I'll have a painting that has sat in my studio for a year, close to done, but not quite. And then suddenly light bulb will go off and I'll be like, oh, that's what it needs. Or being out in the world and seeing something that reminded me of the painting, I'll find a solution for something that was troubling me with it. And sometimes I'll go back in and I'll know what to do and it'll finish, or sometimes I'll go back in and ruin it.
I like that you're working on a couple at the same time. I like that creative process. Do a lot of artists do it that way, or is that just what works for you?
I think a lot do. I think a lot don't. A lot do. I'm not sure. For me, some of it's practical because of oil paints tend to stay wet. So sometimes if the whole surface gets wet, you can start to overwork things where you're not really getting the pops of color or what you want. Things start getting what they call muddy. So it really depends. Some paintings come together more quickly, others can take years to finish. So,
wow, I would think it would be really hard to go back to a painting you've been working on for so long. That seems like it would be frustrating.
yeah, sometimes it is, but it's I always have another painting I can work on too. Sometimes it's better for me to move on to a different painting than keep working on one painting if I'm not clear where it's going. I mean, a lot of times I'll start a painting and I don't know where it's going to go, and I let the painting kind of tell me where to go. But sometimes you think one painting's going to work out, and for whatever reason, it's just not coming together, and maybe you need to scrap it entirely. There's a lot of failures along the way, but I think that's part of being an artist.
Wow, that's part of being creative, right?
Yeah,
Figuring out where you want to go and what you want it to look like.
absolutely. And you have to be, I mean, personally, like I'm not going for photorealism, so I really have to be open to experimenting and taking some risks with things. I mean, even like the painting behind me right here, that's a bit more abstract than some of my paintings. And I really tried to stay playful. And that one really speaks to me as far as like summer and just the colors around the sand, around the beach. And, I try not to take things too seriously. Sometimes when I tend to paint faster at the beginning of a painting, more expressively. I'm less worried. When I get more towards the end of a painting, sometimes you can start slowing down. And it's that slowing down sometimes that's a little dangerous for me because I become a little more literal and a little less free and creative.
It
Um,
has to be a little more
finding
precise
that
to kind of get those
finding
details
that
out. Yeah.
balance of creative expression, but also looking at your work with a critical eye. So it's, finding that balance that feels right, for sure. It's like the perfect beach day. You have to kind of find the balance of, you have to be able to get out in the boat. The tide has to be right. you know, the greenheads can't be bad.
That's such a good analogy because I think everybody understands what it's like to try to go after it. And you really only get a couple that are perfect beach days, right? And you almost don't know until it's over that that was a perfect beach day.
Absolutely.
And I loved what you were talking about the water. And I saw that you have some history in your family tied to the water, right? It was your grandfather?
Yes, my dad's father, he was the last captain of the SS United States, which was one of the America lines. He was also ended up being the Commodore of the fleet. And that's the ship. If you've seen it on the news, it's been in dry dock, or it's been docked in Philadelphia for years. It was really a national treasure. It was such a big part of, it was right before airline travel really took off. And it was a different era of travel by ship. And they've been trying to restore it, trying to figure out ways to preserve it. And they ended up, it just didn't come through. So now it's down in Florida, and I think it's actually going to be sunk and turned into the largest artificial reef in
Oh, wow.
yeah, down in Florida. And my grandfather, I mean, he met so many famous people. He traveled with like Elizabeth Taylor and President Eisenhower and his wife, all these different celebrities, and it was a different time for sure.
What a cool history.
Yeah, it
And
was
to have that
really
in your family is pretty neat.
absolutely. And then my father was a navigator on a nuclear sub, so that was
More
uh,
water. Yeah.
more water. And then on my mom's side, um, they were just huge beach goers, and my grandfather would always go clamming, and was making things from going clamming and fishing. And
So who brought you to Chatham?
it was my dad was working for Digital a million years ago, worked forever for them, and they came down here for a conference. It was at CBI. They used to have a building that was called Digit Hall.
Yep. I remember
And
I worked at CBI.
yeah, a million
Uh-huh.
years ago, not a million years
Million
ago for
years.
you.
Million.
We're so young, right?
Right.
And I think I was maybe two, and came down for a conference, and both my parents had grown up on Long Island, and they lived outside of Boston, and he fell in love with it. And then that summer, my parents started renting a little cottage over on White's Pond, Pell's Cottages, and rented that for a few years. And then they bought a house, and the rest was history. We spent summers and a lot of off season here. And then about 20 years ago, my husband and I bought our little cottage here, and now we live here year round.
So when did you move here year round? A couple of
2021, so
2021,
5
right?
years ago. Yeah.
5 years ago. And your house is currently undergoing a big renovation. How's that been?
Uh, slow, but great. It was, it was a little cottage. It was sort of like camping with walls around you. And we love our spot. We love our location in South Chatham. And we needed to do some updates and make it a year-round house so that we had solid walls and things like that, storage. So,
But
yeah.
it's been more than a few updates, right? Aren't you essentially rebuilding it?
We are. We kind of had no choice. It was, I don't want to say it was a cheap little cottage, but it was a cheap little cottage. And, we looked into renovating it. It just wasn't solid enough to withstand that. So,
You'll be cozy through the next storms of winter next year, right? This year has been a little harder to take.
yeah. This has been a rough one. This has been the roughest winter since we've moved here.
Especially to not have your own house.
Exactly. Well, we're so thankful because my husband's cousin has been loaning us their house, which has been amazing, and so grateful to them. And yeah, Cape Cod's such a great location if you like to run or walk year round, because in general you can. The streets are usually, if you do get snow, it usually doesn't last that long, or the sidewalks are clear pretty quickly. But this winter was
It was a little, I'm with you. I love to walk, and it's really, I took quite some time off this year, and I never do that. I mean, I was away a couple times, but it was not only very cold, but it was hard to get a clear, and I don't like walking when the sidewalks are not cleared. It's not as fun.
no, I'm at that age where ice and injury,
I don't
it's
want
not
to get
worth the
hurt.
risk. No, definitely not.
Usually, you're right though. Usually it's 2 to 4 inches of snow, and then it turns to rain, and then it's beautiful the next day. So
Absolutely.
we had a little less of that. Well,
Absolutely.
tell me, in the summertime, when it gets really busy, tell me, what is your special go-to place? Where's your hideout? What do you like to do when all the crowds are here? What's your favorite summer day?
I have a lot of things. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I love where we live, because in the summer it's like all right-hand turns, like a UPS driver. And I tend to like, I know town is crazy, but like I like to go up there on a Sunday late in the afternoon, sort of at that transition time. But also, I mean, really any of the beaches. And I think we love going out to the outer beach. That's like my special spot
In the boat.
in the boat.
Yeah.
But, I think that's what's so wonderful about Chatham is there's so many special places in Chatham. I mean, literally I love to run, and even on my run, there's like so many different types of views. And because we're on the elbow, we get, if it's windy on one side of town, go to the other side of town. And, there's so many little beaches. If you take walks, you just discover these little places that aren't too crowded. I mean, I do probably avoid town more at the peak hours, but I like to go up there either early or later in the day. And I do love supporting the local businesses, because our downtown's important. So
For sure. But I hear you, and I love the late afternoon Sunday. That's a great time to kind of go for a walk downtown and kind of walk in and out of the stores. That's a great tip.
absolutely. And any of the beaches, like even Harding's, I like to walk down a ways and find a spot, or there's just so many places to explore and discover. So many different beaches. Try them all.
Yeah, I love it too. And going out in the boat, I couldn't agree with you more. Those are my favorite days, when you get to go out in a boat, because you can go to Monomoy and find a spot that's completely secluded.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And yeah, I think you just have to it's going to be crowded in the summer, and it's festive and it's fun because so many people, you run into people from all parts of your life here in the summer. And, if you're going to go to one of the more crowded beaches, you just kind of have to know that if, you have to kind of be patient and have a plan B is sometimes a good idea. But it's a pretty special place. I'm just thrilled that we live here year round, and yeah.
Couldn't agree with you more. Well, thank you so much for coming and talking to me today. And I loved hearing about all of your art. And we can find you this summer downtown, hopefully.
Hopefully downtown, and come to my studio.
Great. And we can follow you on Instagram and find your
Absolutely.
studio times and everything too, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And we will have some summer events there as well, at my studio building, along with a farmer's market and all that. So
Great.
yeah, great.
Well, thank you so much. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Barb. Bye.
Okay. Bye. For more local stories, favorite spots, and inspiring people who chose Chatham, follow and subscribe to Chatham Coffee Tour and stay connected. Whether you're already here or dreaming about life in Chatham, this is your place to belong.